Now, we've been speaking generally about adolescents, and would you agree with me that some 18-year-olds are more mature than other 18-year-olds?
Absolutely.
Okay, and can you talk to us a little bit about where Alan Wade would fall in that?
I have no idea. I mean, I wouldn't want to speculate. I think that to the extent that the trauma and stress that you described in your opening argument is there, I certainly wouldn't think that he'd be at the more mature end of the range, but I really can't say. I've never met him, never tested him. I have no idea.
But you have reviewed prior trial testimony, correct?
I have.
You've reviewed prior trial testimony in this case?
Yes, I have. Mm-hmm.
Your Honor, may I have just a moment? Thank you. Thank you, Your Honor. I have nothing further. I can hear the witness across.
Good afternoon, Doctor.
Good afternoon.
So I want to make sure that I understand that people in late adolescence, 18, 19, 20, that they are capable of empathy, correct?
Yes,
And they understand the difference between right and wrong, correct?
absolutely.
And they would intellectually be able to understand the concept of death
Absolutely.
and understand the permanence of death.
Absolutely.
And that they would have the ability to know that murder is wrong,
Yes.
which means Alan Wade would have had those capabilities.
Unless there's something wrong with him that would limit that intellectual capability, yes, he would.
Well, have you looked at any of the intellectual capabilities of Mr. Wade?
I mean, I believe from what I read, he's of normal intelligence, so, yeah.
There's no defect that you're aware of?
No.
Okay. So I want to be clear about this whole juvenile stuff. Juvenile is under the age of 18, correct? According to the studies that you've participated.
Well, juvenile is a legal word. It's not a word that scientists use.
I got it.
We call them adolescents, but we also call 19-year-olds adolescents.
Sure, I get that. So but I want to clarify your question about juvenile crime.
Okay.
So when you were looking, I think you said 15 and 16-year-olds is what you're looking
In that study, yes.
And in that study, and I know that would not necessarily, well, let me instruct that. You found that in people, juveniles 15 and 16, that had committed crimes, meaning they were in the system, correct?
Correct.
And there was intervention by the system, correct? In other words, they were caught.
They were caught, that we got them because they had been caught. Now, not all of them were locked up. Some of them were on probation or in the community or whatever.
There was some form of societal intervention.
Sure.
Okay. And even with societal intervention, 10% of those reoffended significantly?
Yes, and that's a figure that comes from other studies besides ours.
Well, that's significantly higher than the population as a whole, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. So if you do offend as a juvenile, you're much more likely to reoffend as an adult than a person that did not offend as a juvenile, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you said that that you actually filed, I think, amicus brief saying that life without parole was not an appropriate punishment with regard to juveniles, correct?
That was the Supreme Court's conclusion, yes.
And you're not saying that life is not appropriate for this defendant?
It's not my role to decide what's appropriate for this defendant.
Well, I guess in basing your expert opinion and your trained opinion, it wouldn't be, because there's not a lot of difference between an 18-year-old, 19-year-old, and 20-year-old and a 15 and 16-year-old, right?
From a scientific point of view.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. Well, there's a difference. I think I did say that they're more mature than the 15 and 16-year-olds, but less mature than the 25-year-olds.
Okay, fair enough. I want to talk a little bit, because you mentioned the other, we allow people to drive at 16, correct?
Right.
And I think we could all, from our common sense, acknowledge that the possession of a couple of tons of steel could potentially be very detrimental to our society.
No, I'm in full agreement.
And so certainly we, as a society, have allowed 16-year-olds to do that fully, correct?
Yes.
And then you said something about alcohol having to be 21, correct?
Right.
And I think I read something that you've opined that, in your professional opinion, that the drinking age should be lowered to 19. Is that true?
I do believe that, yes.
So we talked about the differences, the impulse differences, and I understand that no in way, shape, or form is anything that you're saying here today really specifically imputed to Mr. Wade, correct? Because you never evaluated him or anything like that.
Yeah, my role is simply to educate the jury and the court about the science of adolescent development.
Okay. You talked about impulse control. Would you not agree, doctor, that a crime that has been planned for not hours, not minutes, not days, not weeks, but even up to months, that the impulse control of an adolescence would have far less of an effect than a crime that was a much more spur-of-the-moment decision?
Yeah, because I think by spur of the moment is basically impulsive, right?
Right. And that if you planned a crime over not hours, not days, not weeks, if you planned a crime for that long, that would be much more under, I think you referred to it as the cold cognition as opposed to hot cognition. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, but conceivably, you could be part of a group of people that committed a crime that was planned by somebody in the group, but that you didn't do the planning.
Of course, and that's for the jury to decide how much Mr. Wade knew or didn't know during the period of time. But certainly, if Mr. Wade was part of the planning for days and weeks, that would be much more in the cold cognition than the hot cognition.
Yeah.
And I believe you testified earlier that the cold cognition of someone 18, 19, and 20 is nearly identical to that of an adult, correct?
I said it was just as good, not nearly, but just as good.
Just as good, okay. Your words were better than mine, very good. I want to talk a little bit about the peer pressure, and I just want to clarify something, because you said something that if juveniles left unsupervised, bad things happen, right? I think you said that?
Yeah.
But also good things can happen if juveniles are together, right?
Sure.
I mean, I think we see the March for Life is organized by children, right?
Sure.
Okay. Sensation seeking. You're not saying that Mr. Wade had a sensation seeking to see what it was like to bury two human beings alive, right?
I'm not saying anything about Mr. Wade.
Have you heard of the statement that someone just got involved with the wrong crowd or around the wrong people?
Sure.
Is that commonly associated with arguments to lessen somebody's culpability?
Well, sure, if the wrong people did something coercive or put pressure, then sure.
Okay. And I think you've said some of these things, but I just want to go to the general, not with Mr. Gard, with Mr. Wade, but just general limits to our scientific ability of understanding the brain. Okay, is that fair? So at this point in our scientific development, there is no way to look at a human being's brain and tell what type of behavior they're going to embark upon, correct?
The only exception, that's mainly correct, the only exception would be if there was an identifiable tumor or a lesion in the brain that was going to affect a certain kind of behavior, but not an uninjured normal brain, no.
With that exception, you would agree.
Yes,
Okay. And you would agree that there is individual variation in physical development of the brains among individuals, correct?
yes,
And I think you said that that's even manifested itself with regard to behavior in that one 18-year-old may be very mature and another 18-year-old may not be.
correct.
You would agree that scientifically, with the caveat of tumors and lesions and things that you can actually see like that, that structural and physical differences in a human brain do not necessarily equal definable behaviors.
I'm pausing here because I want to distinguish between what science is capable of doing now, which would make your statement correct, and what it might do. Right, let me just put it this way. Everything that we do has to have some brain related to it, right? I mean, there's no behavior that we engage in that isn't affected by what's going on in the brain or by the anatomy of the brain. Whether we can, your question was, can we do that at an individual level, I think, and we can't now, no.
Okay, well, I guess the main part is, although I think generally speaking, the science accepts the concept that the juvenile brain / the adolescent brain is structurally different than a brain in the mid-20s or late 20s.
Yes.
But that doesn't mean that the individual 18, 19, 20-year-old will embark in a certain behavior or not because of these differences.
That's right.
Right, okay. And my next question, I think, will illustrate that more. Would you not agree, doctor, that there are millions upon hundreds of millions of children that are able to control and modify their behavior according to societal norms, correct? Even with all these issues.
Sure.
Hundreds of millions of children are able to not go around killing people.
Yeah, absolutely. Thankfully.
Thankfully, I agree with that. Okay. Would you agree that there is no scientific line that could ever be drawn as to when a person should be treated as an adult or a child, correct?
That's a legal decision. That's not a scientific. I think science can help people who write laws make decisions, but that is a legal decision.
Well, I think you testified earlier that 23, 25, there's even some disagreement now about when it's fully formed, and certainly there's individual differences, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And then would you also agree that the brain goes through a structural or physiological decline, in the mid-40s, early 50s?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in some regions that guide memory, we know there's some decline there.
Right, so the brain in your field is in tip-top working order from 25 to 45. Is that fair?
If for some purposes, if for other purposes it's in tip-top working order at a younger age, like if you were looking at memory,
Right.
it's good by the time it's 16.
Got it, okay. And you would agree that a 17-year-old could be much more mature than a 20-year-old and vice versa, correct?
As individuals, sure.
Now, has there been any work in your field with regard to gender differences in brain development?
Yes.
And in your studies, you found out that women, obviously, I think the jury probably knows this, offend criminally at a much, much, much lower rate than men. Boys, correct?
Yeah, I mean, much, I think it's like now 1/4 of the rate or something like that.
And you would agree that the law shouldn't treat women and men differently, correct?
Correct.
To conclude, doctor, that a person of this defendant's age would have intellectually appreciated the nature of his conduct, correct?
Yes.
He could have had the ability to conform his conduct to society.
Well, unless he was in a situation that he thought he couldn't extricate himself from.
Okay, well, the facts the jury will have to hear all of that.
Right,
I'm
yeah.
talking about generally speaking.
Right,
Based
yeah,
on what
definitely, yes.
Based on what you know about the case.
Yeah.
that he could have, strike that. And that even though he had the ability to do this, he chose wrong, correct?
What took place was wrong. I think everybody would agree with that. I don't want to testify about this particular defendant, but if you're asking me, I think, do people who are 18 years old know the difference between right and wrong, and do they have the capability to choose to do the right thing? The answer is yes to both of those questions.
That's all the questions I have.
Members of the jury, any of you happen to have questions for Dr. All right, thank you, sir. Have a good afternoon.
Okay, thanks, Your Honor.
Action is excused. Thank you.
Yes, Judge, let me go over this.
Would it be?
That would be Pastor William Schwartz. Pastor William Schwartz.
Pastor Schwartz?
He's right outside. Oh, I'm sorry, there he is. Thank you. Thank you.
Sir, if you'll come to the center in front of me here, come on down and take the oath from the clerk, please. Please take a stand.
Good afternoon, Pastor.
Hello.
Can you please state your name and spell it?
My name is William Schwartz, WILLIAMSCHWARTZ,
And Pastor, where do you currently live?
in Belgium.
And what brought you to Belgium?
I had a board meeting here, but obviously the trial as well.
What brought you to Belgium?
Oh,
Not
brought
here.
me to Belgium, I'm
We
sorry.
know why you're here. What brought you to Belgium?
Yeah, I'm a missionary there. I serve as a pastor.
Okay, and so you're currently employed as a pastor?
I am.
Okay, how long have you been doing that?
In ministry, 28 years.
Wow, okay. Now, have you ever been a pastor in Florida?
I have.
And where was that?
I served as a youth pastor in Baker County, Florida, and subsequently became a pastor there as well.
Okay, and so for the jury, Baker County is also known as McClinney, would that be
McClinney,
correct?
Florida was the capital city. Main
What
city.
church was that?
First Assembly of God.
Okay. And were you a youth minister there?
I was.
What years?
From 96 to 2002.
Okay. Now, while at the First Assembly of God, did you ever meet a woman by the name of Frida Gainey?
From day one, yes, ma'am.
Okay. From day one of you being a pastor there? Okay. Did you meet her sons, Alan and Andrew?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I want to talk to you very briefly about Andrew. Were you aware at the time, or have you since become aware of any problems that Andrew has had throughout his life?
Not at the time. I learned later that he's been put on the spectrum or diagnosed to be on the spectrum.
For autism?
Autism, yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you didn't know it at the time, but you know it now. Looking back, your thoughts on that?
Oh, that explains a lot of things. Yeah.
Of Andrew's behavior?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. Now, what period of Alan's life did you have regular contact with him, with Alan Wade?
With Alan, from the time we got to the church, he was probably 9 or 10 years old until the time I left in 2002.
So till about the age of 15, maybe?
I would assume 15, yes, ma'am.
Okay, and that's Alan sitting over there, right?
Yes, ma'am. I
Okay.
recognize him.
Now, how often during that time would you see Alan and his mom, Frida?
Well, our church activities were a minimum of twice a week.
How well did you get to know Alan during that time?
I think I got to know him as well as anybody else could,
Okay,
on the time that I had with him, yes, ma'am.
okay. Did he participate in events at church?
Yes.
Maybe tell me what he did at church. What
Well,
kind
we
of
had a
events?
youth center called The Connection, so it wasn't open just on our youth service nights. So he would frequent there when we were opened up for game days or whatever we were doing, as well as frequented our youth services as well.
Did he play basketball
He did,
Played in the
yeah, we had a
basketball
basketball league, right? Yes, ma'am.
at church? Okay. Did you have the opportunity on a regular basis throughout those several years to observe Alan with other staff or members of the youth group?
Yes, ma'am.
And when he participated, how was his behavior?
Alan's always been very respectful. We never had any problems as far as those type of things, always respectful to adults and so on. I would say he was also withdrawn a bit.
Okay, and we're going to
As well.
talk about that in just a minute.
Okay,
I will get to that, sir. Did he get along with everybody?
yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Yeah.
And you said he was respectful and polite. Did it ever come to your attention when you were communicating with Alan and his mom that Frida was a single mother?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And so you were aware of that pretty early on?
From day one, yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
Did you ever have the occasion to meet Alan Sr. during that time?
His father,
His father?
yes, once or twice.
Just once or twice?
Briefly, this is Alan's dad type of introductions, yes.
Very short interaction?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm going to call him Mr. Wade Sr. or Alan Sr.
Okay.
And that means Alan's dad didn't participate with the church events and
No, ma'am.
things. That Alan didn't come see Alan play basketball,
No, ma'am.
anything like that?
No.
Never brought him? Yeah.
No,
Okay.
no, ma'am.
What were your impressions? I want to go back to Miss Frida Gainey, his mother.
Mm-hmm.
What were your impressions of Frida and how she was managing her family, including Alan and Andrew?
She was a hard worker, had a job, she did the best she could with being a single mom with growing boys. I definitely wouldn't say it was easy. It was certainly a struggle. that she had.
And I guess I jumped ahead a little bit. At some point, Mr. Allen Sr. was gone from the picture completely, right?
I've never known him to be in the picture, ma'am.
Thank you. So Ms. Frida, she was struggling, trying to do the best that she could, is what you
Yes,
said.
ma'am.
Okay. Were you ever made aware of Miss Frida Gainey's cancer diagnosis?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And in fact, the church gave her some help, correct?
Yes, ma'am, I
Okay,
believe we did,
all right.
yes.
As much as you could to help her out?
Yeah.
Okay. But she had really no other support?
Not that I'm aware of.
No friends or other family that were helping her?
Outside of the church, not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Yeah.
What can you speak about, or what can you speak to about the impact that Ms. Frida's cancer had on Alan?
I think it was hard on everybody. I mean, to be honest, there was no dialogue that I had directly with Alan concerning that event, but it certainly capitalized on the environment of the home that was already a challenge, I would
Right.
say, being led by a single mom.
Right. And so did you see Alan become more withdrawn
Yes,
around that time?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Did you have any conversations with Alan Jr. about his dad leaving?
I had a conversation with Alan in regards to ping pong table that he wanted to.
No, I don't think you understood my question. About his dad leaving. Did you have any conversations just about the dad being absent?
My conversations with Alan about his dad being absent was the fact that he was absent.
Okay. And
Yeah.
it was hard for him?
Yes,
Something that Alan, from what I'm hearing, would talk about, but it was hard to talk about
yes.
for him.
Yeah, he wasn't an open book by any means.
Okay. Now, tell us the ping pong story table.
Well, as I mentioned, we had a youth center. It was called The Connection. And Frida is a very generous person. And she said, we have this ping pong table at the house. It belongs to the boys. And I'd like to give it to the youth center to use up there. I learned that Alan was very upset about that. And
Why?
well, I went and talked to him about it and asked what the deal was. And he said, well, it's the last thing my dad ever gave me. And he was very upset that his mom was giving it away. So we certainly wasn't going to take it away from him. At that point, he eventually gave it to us out of his own desire to do so.
Alan did.
Alan did.
Alan Wade Jr.
Yes.
Okay, so let me go back. So ping pong table wasn't because Alan was being selfish.
No, man. No,
It was
he was
because it
very
was-
emotional
He
To
was
the
very
fact
emotional.
that we sat in his front porch and he said, "It's the last thing my dad gave me." Up to that point, I'm sure there's probably things after that, but at that point, it's something his dad gave him that was important to him.
It's all he had left of his dad.
I would,
An emotional attachment.
yes, ma'am, he was very emotionally attached to it because of that.
All right. And then you said at a later time, Alan decided to go ahead and donate it to the church so other kids could enjoy it.
Well, I think he came as well periodically.
Oh, so he participated as well?
I think so.
In the ping pong?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
All right, great. I want to talk to you about the concerns that you as a pastor and a human being, do you have kids?
I have 2 adult children, yeah.
Okay, so being a parent, being a pastor, being around youth, at this time, what were your concerns about Alan?
Well, I was always concerned of how withdrawn he was. I was also always concerned as well. Anytime I saw Alan outside of our context, he seemed to be with, some young men who were probably a couple years older than him. Alan was always a follower. And some people are leaders, some are followers.
He was not a leader, he was a follower.
Yes, ma'am. In my opinion, he certainly was.
Okay. And when you saw him in these groups, what was your impression about what he was trying to get out of it?
I think Alan's always been looking for a mentor or father figure in his life at that stage of his life.
And just couldn't find one?
No. Our youth team, we talked about it often, our youth ministry team.
Specifically about Alan?
Specifically about Alan and others as well. What they're looking for. We're always looking for a connection on how to connect with young people.
So he's seeking approval?
Absolutely,
He's seeking a father figure?
in my opinion.
He's seeking support from anyone
In
or
my
anywhere
opinion,
he can get
absolutely.
it?
Yes, ma'am.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Pastor, thank you so much for being here.
This is right.
Nice to see you again, Pastor.
As well.
So Mr. Wade, the defendant in this case, spent a minimum of 2 days a week from 1996 until 2002 in your church.
We didn't count every time, but on an average, it would be 2 times a week, yeah.
And sometimes more, he would just come up and play basketball or play ping pong. Or
Sure,
things like that.
certainly.
The church was open, I guess, during business hours for the youth to come. Is that
We
fair?
had days that we were open, yes. Yeah.
So that the 2 days, and I understand, they may have been out of town or been sick, I understand, but generally speaking, it'd be 2 or more days a week.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, sir.
Okay. And he did that from age 9 to 10 all the way to 15? All right?
Yes.
Okay. And so during this period of time, I assume you and your fellow pastors are doing your best to instill in all of your youth good Christian values. Is that fair?
Of course.
You're trying to teach them the difference between right and wrong. Yes?
Yes.
And I know you tried your best. Is that fair?
Indeed.
And all the things that counsel asked you about being a father figure, you would have been willing to do that as best as you could, correct?
Indeed.
And during all the period of time that you were with the defendant, you never saw him doing risky behavior, correct?
Never saw him doing any risky behavior. I was certainly concerned with some of the company he was keeping.
Fair enough. And you never saw him actively wasted on drugs or narcotics, correct?
No, but I heard.
Okay. But in your interactions with him, he
No.
appeared to be sober.
Yes, indeed.
And that was all the way until he was 15 years old?
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions I had.
Mr. Wade, a second.
Yes, sir. No further questions. Thank you.
Members of the panel, any questions for Joe Brennan?
Council have a motion?
You made his motion on the. I'm going to pass Schwartz two brief questions from one of the jurors. Did you know about no school since the 8th grade?
I'm going to have to say no to that.
I'm sorry?
No,
You did not?
I wasn't aware.
Okay. Did Mr. Wade's mother ever discuss drug use with you?
Yes.
Follow-up, Ms. Abel.
Yes. Pastor, can you tell me about?
The drug use?
Yes.
It just said there was suspicion that there was some usage. That was certainly closer to my time of departing.
Okay. But it was discussed with mom, and so mom was aware?
It was discussed with me from mom that there was a concern.
Okay.
That,
Okay. Thank you.
Any further questions from the jury for Pastor? Thank you very much for your time. I have speaking to
Yes, sir, is excused.
Have a good afternoon. Let's take this day. Who's the next witness going to be?
It's going to be Mr. Wade, Senior.
Okay. Maybe 10 minutes?
Yes, sir.
Let's take it for 10 minutes, ladies and gentlemen, the jury will step back. ready to proceed, Mr. Okay. If our jury is ready, have them join us, please. Oh, sure. All right, our jury is returned. Be seated, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Richards.
Defense calls Alan Wade Sr., Your Honor.
Is Mr. Yes, yes.
He's approaching, Your Honor.
Mr. Wade, if you come on up to the clerk in front of me and take the oath, please.
Please state and spell your name.
Alan L. Wade Sr., A-L-A-N, L middle initial, Wade, W-A-D-E,
And where do you currently live?
Ormond Beach, Florida.
Are you currently employed?
No, sir.
Are you Alan Wade Jr.'s father?
Yes, sir.
Were you previously married to Alan's mother, Frida Gainey?
Yes, I was.
How many children did you and Miss Gainey have?
2.
And that would have been Alan and Andrew?
That's correct.
Was your marriage to Miss Gainey your second marriage?
Yes, it was.
Did you have any children when you met Miss Gainey?
An adult daughter that was in Connecticut.
And her name is Trish, correct? Her name is Trish, sir?
That's her nickname. Patricia is her real name.
Okay. When you and Miss Gainey were married, what part of the state, or where did you and her live at?
Daytona Beach.
Okay. Did you and Miss Gainey eventually separate?
Yes, we did.
And about how long were you and Miss Gainey together before you separated?
Roughly 17 years.
Okay. How was it that you two became separated?
Numerous reasons.
Okay. Did it have something to do with the job, going back to school or anything like that?
That part of it, yes.
Did there come a time that you came home one day and Frida and Alan were gone?
Yes.
Can you tell us about that?
I just came home and there was a note on the table and said, we've left.
Okay. And how old was Alan when he and Miss Gainey left?
Approximately 9 or 10, somewhere in that neck of the woods.
Did you know where she and the boys had gone?
Not for about 6 weeks.
So for 6 weeks, you didn't know where Alan had gone, is that correct?
I didn't know where any of them were.
Okay. Did you eventually find them?
By accident, yes, sir.
How did you find them?
I happened to call her sister's house and ask them if they'd seen them, and one of the girls that was there said, "Oh, Aunt Frida?" And they grabbed her, and I said, "I got them."
And where was Miss Gainey's sister's house at?
Glen St. Mary's.
Do you know if Miss Gainey and the boys stayed there long term?
I don't know the exact length of time, but it wasn't shortly thereafter they moved into a double mobile home.
And that was in McClenny?
That's correct.
Now, prior to Miss Gainey leaving, how would you describe your relationship with your son, Alan Wade Jr.?
We always got along fine. We went fishing, and if I was doing something, he wanted to be in the middle of it.
And did you do other stuff with him?
Not as much as I should have, because I ran the roads. I was third-party maintenance for Litton Amacom, and we did Daytona, Orlando, and Jacksonville airport flight control stuff.
Now, after Miss Gainey took the boys to McClenny, how often would you get to see Alan?
It was very sporadic, maybe once every 2 or 3 months.
How would you describe your relationship with Alan during this time?
Kind of mixed emotions. He was there, but he didn't talk much. And then his older brother, Andrew, had told me that he was on drugs, and I quizzed Alan.
We'll get to that. We'll get that.
Okay.
And at some point this time, did you move out of state?
Yes, I was in Savannah for 5 years.
Okay. And what were you doing for work during this time?
I was a third-party contractor delivering air freight.
Are there times you would drive down from Savannah to see them and the boys would not be available?
That's correct.
Why weren't they available?
Well, I got different answers. You know, Andrew would say he told Alan and Frida that I was coming, and they would say he didn't tell us. So I can't stand there and point my finger at anybody because I don't know what was going on at the time.
And were you able to speak with Alan on the telephone during this time?
Intermittently.
Were there times that you would get the answering machine?
I don't think it was an answering machine. It just kept ringing, and then finally I'd get Frida, and she said, "I'll tell them you're coming."
Eventually, did you tell the boys to call you when they wanted to see you and you would pick them up?
Well, there was a spat between them, and I couldn't point my finger, and Frida kind of turned on me, and I guess it was everything in, conjunction with what was going on. And when she turned on me, I figured I'll be the one in jail because this is her city and I'm out of town. So I told the boys, I said, "I won't darken that door again." I said, "If you tell me I'm supposed to come pick you up or come see you, we'll go to the mall or whatever." And I would say, "If you're not there, I'm leaving." I said, "If y'all want me, I'll come blow the horn, I'll stay in the street, and you can go with me for whatever length of time we're going to have."
Did you ever see Frida smack one of the boys?
Both of them that same day.
And when I say smack, you mean hit them. Is that correct?
She hit Andrew, the older one, and his glasses cut him under the eye. And Alan had sassed her about something, and she'd popped him in the mouth, and he had a little bloody nick on his lip.
Now, at one point, for a 2-week period, did you pick Alan up and take him?
Twice, I think.
Okay. Did you have to buy him clothes at that time?
The one time I did, yeah, I went to pick him up, and he had one pair of shorts, one pair of tennis shoes, and I think he had the socks and underwear he was wearing. So we went to Walmart when I got back to Savannah and dropped another $100 on clothes that he could take back with him.
When you came back to Florida, where did you live?
Well, I had a former partner, and they had an extra room. I was going to sleep in my van, and my partner said, "No, you won't. We got 2 extra rooms. You stay here until you get set up."
And why did you do that?
I had nowhere else to go. Well, that, and I had a job offer to drive boats statewide, and it fell through. So I had what money was in my pocket and what gas was in the tank of the van.
Were you able to make child support payments during this time?
Intermittent.
Did you get in arrears in child support payments?
I had a slip and fall, and I got, it was a little over 8,000, I think.
How often would you see Alan between the ages of 14 and 18?
I would say somewhere between once every 2 or 3 months, maybe.
And this is between the ages of 14 and 18 that you saw him?
No, not 18, no. He was 14 or 15, I think, was the last time, and it was about the time he gave the ping pong table to the youth group.
Okay, so between the ages, let's say 16, 17 and all that, you didn't see him, is that correct?
No, sir, I did not.
And you weren't a part of his life, is that correct?
No, I wasn't.
Now, during this time, you said that were you aware of Alan's substance abuse?
Just from what Andrew had said, and with him having Asperger's, I couldn't say it was true. And we went to court down there about child support, and Frida mentioned that to the judge, and the judge just politely looked at him and says, "We're not here about your personal problems."
So you didn't talk to Alan about this or do anything to try to get him off drugs?
No, sir, I didn't.
And you didn't put him in rehab or anything like that, is that correct?
No, I wish I could have.
Did you have the money?
No.
Were you aware that Alan was staying with other families during this time?
No, and I figured that was when I couldn't get in touch with him I heard it later that, he was in, right after he got arrested.
How did you find out about your son's arrest in this case?
A friend of mine, well, actually, my stepson's wife had called my daughter, and my daughter said Nikki thought that Alan had gotten in some trouble, and it sounds like it's pretty bad. So a friend of mine told me, he says, "Well, go on Google his name and Duval County," and I did, and I fell right on the floor. I said, "This can't be my son." I said, "It's got to be wrong."
Why is that?
He never showed any of those things.
Did you ever visit Alan in the county jail?
I think twice.
Okay. And what was the reason for that?
Well, one, I didn't have the gas to drive up here, and 2, he needed money, and only one time I was able to give him $50 for, I think they called it canteen or something.
And were you ever able to talk to him weekly by phone, or did you ever talk to him by phone while he was in jail?
There was a while that he was calling me like once every couple of weeks or something, and we would talk on the phone.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Witnesses with the state, Your Honor.
Mr. Wade, you never reported any abuse that Alan would have suffered at the hands of your ex-wife, correct?
No, I did not.
And if you thought he was being significantly abused, you would have reported.
Yeah, well, like I said, it was just that one time that I saw the abuse. I mean, it wasn't real significant, but apparently with the frame of mind that was going on in that household, it might have been, and I didn't see it. I'm not a doctor.
I get it, but the abuse was as a result of something that Alan did, correct? He sassed, I think you said?
He sassed her or something. I came in kind of in the tail end of it.
And you never abused Alan, correct?
No, sir.
If you knew that Alan was being abused, you would have reported it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Is it fair to say that you tried to do your best by your son?
With what little bit I had, yes.
And had, except for your domestic difficulties with his mother, you made it clear to Alan that you cared about him, correct?
Oh, yeah.
You made it clear that you were there for him if he needed you.
Yes, sir.
That's all the questions I have.
Any follow-ups, Mr. Richardson?
Looking back on your time with Alan, is it fair to say that you weren't there for your son even though you might have wanted to be?
Yes, sir.
Okay, nothing further.
Members of the jury, do you have any questions for Mr. Wade? I don't see any. All right, thank you for your time, Mr. Wade. You may stand down.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Abel?
Yes, sir. Maybe call Nikki Craig.
Again?
Nikki Craig.
Ms. Craig? Ms. Craig, if you'll come on down to the clerk in front of me and take the oath, please. Please take a stand.
Good afternoon, Ms. Craig. Can you state your name and please spell it?
Nikki Craig, Nickraig.
And you are a guest here in Jacksonville today, correct?
Yes,
Where do you currently live? Where are you coming from?
Westfield, Massachusetts.
Okay. Are you currently employed?
Yes,
What do you do for a living?
I'm a CNA.
How long you been doing that?
About 35 years now.
Okay, and for members of the jury that may or may not know, can you tell us what a CNA is?
I'm
I
a
think I
cer-
know.
A certified nursing assistant.
Okay, all right, very good. Do you know this gentleman, Alan Wade?
Yes,
Okay, how do you know him?
he was my ex-husband's brother, so he's my ex-brother-in-law.
Okay, and that would be Robert, was
Ye-
Mr. Wade's brother?
Yes,
And you were married to Robert?
yes,
Okay, you're not any longer married to Robert?
no,
Okay. Do you also know, might be an obvious question, Miss Gainey?
Yes.
Gainey, okay. And so you're familiar with her as well? All right. Now, I want to go back to Alan's brother, Robert. How did you all meet?
through friends,
Okay, and did you all meet in Florida here?
yes.
How long ago was that?
Oh, gosh, 30 years ago, give or take.
Okay. And how long after you met Robert and you all started dating did you get married?
We were about 7 or 8 years.
Then you got married?
Yep.
And then how long did your marriage last?
Not long, not even 2 years.
Why is that?
There were problems. He had developed some drug addictions, and I just didn't think that was a very healthy atmosphere to raise our daughter.
Okay. So he was doing, Robert, Alan's brother, doing illegal drugs.
Yes,
Did Alan look up to him?
yes.
He was Alan's kind of a hero? He was Alan's hero?
I can't say about that, but
Now, did you and Robert have any children?
yes.
And what is your daughter's name?
Alyssa Jade.
Okay, and she's here in the courtroom today too, right?
Yes, she is.
Now, how long did you and Robert live together in Florida?
On and off about 7, 8 years.
At some point, you both moved to Massachusetts, yes?
Yes.
But Robert leaves after a year.
Yeah, about that, yes.
Why?
He wanted to go back to Florida. He had a side job there, and he ended up meeting or running into old friends. I'm not quite sure the exact circumstances, but he wanted to stay in Florida, and then he started, just like hanging out and doing drugs and everything, and he didn't want to come back to Massachusetts, and I really didn't want him there.
Because of the drug use?
Yes.
And how old was Jade when you all first moved to Massachusetts?
She was about 2, almost 2.
Now, there is somewhat of a significant age difference between Alan and Robert.
Yeah.
Robert's older.
Yes.
By how many years?
9 years, maybe?
Okay, all right.
I'm not really good with,
Robert was the big brother.
yes.
Did Robert ever come back to Massachusetts after he left? To move permanently, I mean.
No, no,
And so then you all ended up getting divorced, right?
yes.
Could the age difference between Alan and Robert be more than 10 years? 15?
Yes,
Okay,
I'm terrible with,
it's okay, I am too. So it's possible it could be 15.
yes.
Did Miss Gainey ever visit you and Robert while you were living in Massachusetts?
Yes,
And did Alan ever come to visit?
yes,
Did he come by himself one summer?
yes.
How old would he have been on that summer?
About 14, I believe.
And while he was up there, he visited with other family, right?
Yes, his half-sister Trish,
Trisha, okay?
Yep.
She lives in,
Connecticut.
right, so he's up there with you primarily for the summer, but he goes and he sees his half-sister as well.
Yes.
And did y'all have a good summer?
I thought we had a great time.
It was enjoyable?
Yes, my friend, they live on a lake, and we went out there and went out in a boat, and we did some other things, and all the teenage girls in the neighborhood were all coming around, and
Because of Alan?
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So you went boating, did outdoor activities?
Yeah, we went to the amusement park, and we went up to my girlfriend's in New York and went sightseeing and things like that.
And Alan always enjoyed himself when he was with your family?
I hope so. He seemed to have had a nice time.
He had structure, right?
Yeah,
Okay. He had people that cared about him.
sure.
He had things to do,
Yeah,
family to rely on,
yes,
and family events, the things that you all did together as a family, right?
Yes.
Even though you all are not blood, related by blood, right?
right.
Okay. I want to shift your focus to your daughter, Jade.
Sure.
What kind of relationship did Alan and Jade have?
They seemed very close. They were, she always took to him and admired him, and they were always giggling, and he was always wanting to play with her, and he was kind of protective of her, and just goofing off with her and making her laugh, and
Okay. Was he loving with her?
very, yes,
Was he gentle with her?
yes.
I've heard a story, maybe you can tell it, about a stroller?
Oh, Alan used to love rollerblading. It was very athletic, and he used to put her in the her little stroller and strap her in and go up and down the street with her in the rollerblades, and she'd just be laughing, having a wonderful time.
So he sort of filled in like a big brother to Jade.
Yes.
Would that be a good?
Yes,
favorite?
sure.
Okay.
Yep.
Now, another thing about Alan and Jade, obviously you said they had a strong bond, but I think there was something that happened that probably made that bond a little stronger, something that almost could have been a terrible ending
Oh,
with your daughter.
one time, my son, where the apartment building he lived, they had a built-in pool, and she was running towards the pool, and I'm like, no, the water's deep. And of course, she was being little, didn't listen, and she dove into the water, and Alan didn't even hesitate. He just jumped right in and got her right out.
Saved her.
Sure.
Okay, so he wasn't going to let anything bad happen.
No, he was very, very protective of her.
Okay. Do you have any memory of Alan having friends in the neighborhood when he was with you?
Well, he wasn't there that long, but one of the girls used to come over every once in a while and want to hang out.
Okay. Was that the only summer that Alan visited you in Massachusetts?
Yes.
As a child? Okay. And so after the divorce and after that summer, did you continue to have contact with Frida Gainey?
Yes,
Now, did Jade ever visit Miss Gainey in Florida?
yes,
Summers?
yes. She would go just about every summer and spend time with her.
Okay. Now, regarding Alan, when you were going through your divorce, did Alan do anything to help you out Were you struggling a little bit?
Yes, very much so. I was having a very hard time financially and emotionally, obviously. And at one point, him and his friend Tiffany sent money.
Okay, that was to help you with bills?
Yes. He was very upset that his brother would do that to me and his niece, who he adored.
Okay, so he was trying to help you all in any way that he could?
Yes.
Help keep the lights on, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
When you heard about Alan's arrest and the reason why we're here today, what was
Yeah.
your reaction?
I was just shocked. I couldn't believe that it was that Alan I knew would do something like that or be involved in that. That was just very much out of character for the boy I knew.
Have you maintained contact with Alan throughout the years?
Yes,
You've written letters,
yes,
seen him in the prison?
yes,
He and Jade write too, right?
yes.
Tell me about, and I think we're going to hear from her, but tell me about your observation of the friendship or more than a friendship, almost brother-sister relationship, and when she would get letters.
Well, obviously, she was devastated by her father leaving, and Alan was always like right there for letters, and she would get really excited to go, can we go to the P.O. box to see if Uncle Alan sent me a letter? And I was like, sure, and it would just like brighten up her day, hearing from him, and he wrote her quite often, and it just meant so much that, she didn't have her dad, but she had him and his support and love, and she could, write to him about anything she wanted to, things going on in middle school with the girl drama and everything, just everything she could share with him.
And in fact, at one point when Miss Gainey was diagnosed with cancer, she called and asked if she could send Alan to you. Is that right?
Yes, and I didn't think that was such a good situation because I didn't think Robert was such a good role model for him. He was having his own issues with, drug abuse and and being in his own little world, and I didn't think it was such a good fit because I was, just struggling trying to, keep my family going, and
Right.
it wasn't a good situation at the time.
Right. And back to Jade, I don't mean to skip around, but would you agree that Alan was more of a father figure to Jade than Jade's own father?
Yeah, even just through letters and her visits to Florida, seeing him, absolutely.
Never missed a birthday?
Never missed a birthday, never missed anything.
Never missed a holiday?
Never, not a Mother's Day, he never missed my birthday. He used to send beautiful artwork to us, frame-worthy, beautiful things that were just, yeah.
Still have them?
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor?
Some of his artwork is incredible.
All right, just a couple more questions. And I appreciate you being here and coming all this way, Ms. Craig. Do you love Alan?
Yes, very much.
And will you continue to love Alan?
I love Alan with all my heart. He's one of my favorite people in the whole world.
Even if he spends the rest of his life in prison?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Really appreciate you coming.
You're welcome.
State may have some questions for you.
Sure.
Mrs. Roger?
Ms. Craig, during this long-distance period of time, I guess between 14 and 18 with regard to Alan Wade, did you know about any drug use?
I had suspicions. Rita called me once and saying that Alan's very paranoid and acting very funny, and I just assumed he was doing some kind of drugs. I didn't know because I wasn't there with him doing any, so I don't really know that for a fact, but I assume so.
And so the summer he was with you, you didn't see anything like that?
No.
How old was he when he spent the summer with you?
I'm 14, and I have a son who's older, so I'm very in tune with what's going on with that. I'm very aware of people and their stuff, and I didn't see any sign of that when he was with us.
During that summer, did you ever see any antisocial behavior or any rage issues or anything like that?
No, he was very helpful. We'd go to the grocery store, and he'd be very helpful and want to hang out and help me cook dinner, and he was a pleasure.
And from your experience with him, did he know the difference between right and wrong?
Yes,
And all these conversations, obviously you had a relationship with Miss Gainey,
yes,
and you trusted her so much that you would send your daughter down to be with her, correct?
yes, yep.
Did Miss Gainey have the best interest in what would happen to her son, Alan?
Let's say that one more time, I'm sorry.
Did she have the best intentions for what happened to her son, Alan? Did she love him and care for him?
Did she, yes,
And you witnessed that?
yes.
That's all the questions I have.
Members of the, I'm sorry, Ms. Abel, members of the jury, any questions for Ms. Craig? Ms. Craig, thanks for your time. You may stand.
You're welcome.
Ms. Abel?
Yes, sir. Call Brian Dobson.
Ms. Dobson, please.
Okay,
She's going good.
thank you, sir.
Mr. Dobson, if you'll come on in to the clerk in front of me here and take the oath, please. All right, please take the stand over here, Mr. Dobson. Ms. Abel?
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Can you state your name and spell it for the record?
Brian Gerald Dobson, BrianGerald,
Where do you currently live?
I live in McClenny.
How long you lived there?
Lived there all of my life. I'm 57, except for a brief stint at college.
Okay. Are you currently employed?
I'm not.
You are retired, is that right?
Yes,
Congratulations.
thank you.
You are retired as an educator, would that be accurate?
That is.
And how long were you involved in education?
My whole career, pretty much my whole professional career, so that's 30 years in the Florida retirement system, 30 plus.
Do you know Alan Wade?
I do.
When did you first meet Alan?
I met him at Baker County Middle School. I believe it was 2002 school year.
Okay, was he in 8th grade? Would that
It
sound
was in
right?
8th grade, I believe. Yeah.
And what was your position at Baker County at that time?
I was an assistant principal.
And as an assistant principal, what was your main responsibility?
Discipline.
Okay. That's at Baker County, right, middle school?
Yes, ma'am.
Sorry if I repeated myself. And you had started there just at the beginning of your career, right, 1993?
Well, I'd been teaching since I taught. I started in 1991 teaching, and then taught for several years, and then became an assistant principal at a high school, and then moved over to the middle school. So I was there 1 year.
Yes, sir. Now, how did you come to know Alan?
So when I went to the middle school, I wanted to be proactive. So in the summer, I took the time to go over all of the referrals that had been done the previous year. And I sorted out the referrals. If someone had, I think it was 10, it's been a long time, but I think, let's say 10 referrals, or there was some litmus test that I used. And if they exceeded that number of referrals, then I looked at those referrals. I tried to determine if there was anything behavior-wise in those, if it was just tardies or whatever. And so there was a group that rose to the top that I decided to speak with over the summer if I could, just to say, hey, we're looking at a new year. Let's do things as well as we can. Let's be good. I'm here if you need me to talk to me. Please, come by rather than misbehave or whatever. So I was trying to get them to think about the year. And I had a contract that I had drawn up that just said, I agree to behave, basically. And
Alan's a part of that group.
He was a part of that group.
Now, just because you say referral doesn't mean something violent or egregious, correct?
No.
It could be chewing gum.
Yeah, most
Tardy.
of them were not anything on that level. If they were moved from that school.
Okay, so it could be like tardies,
Could
parents, they're not getting to school on time, things like that, right?
Could be.
Okay, specifically with Alan, nothing stands out that you recall that was particularly egregious about his referrals, just typical teenage stuff.
Yes.
Okay. And there were several kids that had 10 or more referrals, right?
Yes.
Okay. Did you ever meet with Alan and his mother, Frida Gainey?
I did. I tried to meet with every student and parent prior to during that summer. And to be frank, I don't remember whether I met with them in person or over the phone.
But you did meet.
But I did meet with them because I was trying to involve the parents.
And you're trying to be proactive, right?
Yes, I was trying to be proactive.
You're trying to set them up for success. And you're putting yourself in the position of, from what I can tell, I've got an open door policy. Come see me.
Yes.
You got problems? I'm your guy. Come to me. We can talk it out. I can help, right?
Yes, I would walk around campus to be out on campus, as were the other assistant principals there too.
Right, and you're doing it for the benefit of the welfare of these kids, right?
Yes.
Okay. When you had that meeting with Alan and his mother, whether it was phone or I know it's been some time, phone or live, did Alan seem to have a good year that year?
He did, as far as I remember.
And you had a lot of interaction with him that year, right?
I had a good bit of interaction with him, yes.
So you became somewhat of a support system for Alan.
I would say so, yes.
Okay, and of course, next year he goes on to high school, right?
That's right.
Okay, and tell me, you made a phone call to high school, right?
I did.
Tell me about that. When
Well,
Alan went to high school.
I was leaving the school system and Baker County school system, and I called the high school because I wanted to make sure that, there was somebody that was aware that he was coming over there and that, if they could establish a relationship, that he gets a good start there. He had had a pretty good year and wanted to see him go on and do
And
well.
continue having
Yes.
a good year, right?
Yes.
And then Alan goes, right, and you have no idea
Yeah, I didn't know.
what happened. Now, were you aware of anything in particular about Alan's home life?
I was.
Okay. How did you learn about Alan's home life?
I don't remember when that would have come up, but I felt that Frida, or remember her being pretty open as a parent. She talked to me. So we would have conversations early on, and I would have talked to Alan. I don't remember when I knew more about his home life, but that would just come if he would drop by, or my office was in a hallway where a lot of the kids walked by. And so
The busy part, right?
yes, it was a busy part of the school. And so I don't remember at what point this happened, but he came and talked to me about a concern that he had about his family.
Okay.
And
he dropped by a few times, right?
yes,
Okay. He talked to you about his mother's cancer?
he did.
Okay. Tell me, when he talked to you about his mom having cancer, thoughts? I mean, how did he even broach that subject with you, and how was it affecting him?
Yeah. I don't remember, how he broached it. I just remember that he told me. I remember him being concerned about his mom. And I think that was the point that he said he didn't see his mom as much as he wanted to, or something like that.
That he was missing her a lot.
Yes,
Okay. And she was absent a lot.
yes,
And he expressed that to you.
yes.
And he expressed it most times, if not all, majority, if not most. When he went home after school, he was home alone.
He said that it seemed like there might have been a brother or somebody that was there, but I can't remember that. I just remember he did indicate that he was alone.
Did you think he was isolated? I mean, give me your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I did. I wasn't sure really anything about his social, I mean, who he hung around with or anything like that. I thought the part about him being alone at home, especially overnight, was unusual for somebody that age.
Most isolated kid that you knew
I would say that that's probably true at that time.
at that time, right? Okay. Back to the cancer. Was he afraid?
I think so. Most kids would be. He was like most kids. What I saw in kids that had parents that were going through something like that, there's actually a tendency, it seemed to me, for them to withdraw a little bit themselves, you know. I don't know if it's a protection mechanism or what, but it seems like that's sometimes how that happens.
Was he afraid or scared of her death?
Yes, I think so. I mean, I don't, it would not have been a surprise to me if he was. I'm sure he was bothered by the situation. That's what I remember.
I'm going to skip forward a little bit, and I'm going to come back, okay? You've seen Alan since his arrest, correct?
Yes,
Okay, you see him in prison
yes,
a few times.
yes, ma'am.
You also have written him letters
Yes,
in support of him.
yes.
To tell him what?
Just to remind him that God can love him even though he did this terrible thing,
Right.
and that he's worth something, and that, you know, I definitely believed God loved him, and I felt like I wanted to tell him and remind him that he's still valuable as a human being.
Even at his worst moment.
Yes.
So his worst moment, what you're saying, it does not define who he is. He's a human being and God's child.
Yeah, that's what I would say, is he's a human being, yeah.
Yes, sir. Okay. I want to go back to a particular phone call that's, and I know you're nervous, right?
Sure.
We've talked about this, that you're nervous being here today. At some point, did Alan come to you and express his doubt of his mother's love? Meaning, I don't think my mom loves me.
Yes, I don't remember actually when he said it first, but he would have said it more than one time for me to make a call to his mom.
Told you several times. I mean, maybe not in a row, maybe not at once, but over.
Yeah, he could have said it twice, he could have said it 3 times. I don't know what it was, but probably, if I would guess, I'd say 3 times. I don't remember.
And so, what was your response to that when you were talking with Alan?
So at whatever point he said it again, repeated it, however many times that was, I said, well, Alan, I think, you know, I had talked to his mom, Frida, and I said, I don't think you're right about that. And I think that you need to hear from your mom, because she may be upset with you about how you're behaving, but I believe she loves you beyond that behavior.
Okay, so as an educator, someone that's been around children for years, I'm going to assume, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, that you never would have thought that a mother would not say to their child, I love you. Is that accurate?
I mean, it would be highly unusual.
If you thought that, you wouldn't have made the phone call, right?
I wouldn't have called her because I believe she did love him.
Right. So you give her a call, and Alan's in your office, right?
Mm-hmm.
And yes?
Yes, ma'am.
And you put her on speaker.
I did.
And it's a lengthy conversation, right?
I don't remember if it was that lengthy. I think what I tried to do as a preface to asking her this in front of Alan is to talk to her about where Alan was, what he had said, what he was expressing to me, and then try to differentiate between the feelings that a parent can have with a teenager that is not behaving the way that they should.
Frustration
Yeah, the frustration of a parent.
of a teenage boy.
Yes. Versus loving that person unconditionally beyond their behavior.
Two different things, right?
In my mind, it is.
Okay. And so you're acknowledging to Miss Gainey, you're acknowledging her feelings. Teenage boys, you must be frustrated. You're telling her you get it, because you do get it, right? Because you're there all day. But then what do you say? What do you ask her to do?
Well, I said, Alan, I think, wants to hear you say that you love him unconditionally beyond the behavior. And I told her that he was, admitting his own, that he was a teenager and that he was hard to, at times to raise that attitude like most teenagers do, or some teenagers. And that, I was trying to let her know that he saw his own behavior and that kind of thing.
He acknowledged it.
Yes, he did.
And so you said,
I said, so will you, I guess the question and not the how do you feel about him, his behavior, but he wants to hear you say that you love him
and there was a long
unconditionally.
pause.
And there was a pause.
And you did not expect the answer coming.
No.
And what was the answer?
The answer, as I recall, was, Mr. Dobson, I can't say that right now, or something like that.
Thank you, sir, for being here.
Mr. Dobson, as an assistant principal at that time, you would have been a mandatory reporter of abuse, correct?
Yes,
And you did not report any abuse in the Wade household, correct?
I did not.
Objection, Your Honor, outside the scope of direct examination of what was asked of the witness. I never talked about abuse.
You could have called the Department of Children and Family Services if you did not think Alan Wade was being given what he needed to survive, correct?
I could have.
And you did not.
I did not.
Did you ever talk to Alan Wade or Frida Gainey about Pastor Schwartz and the wonderful things he was doing for the family?
I don't remember. I knew at some point, I think I knew that Pastor Schwartz was involved when I went to the previous testimony or whatever.
Okay.
So, no, I don't think I knew a whole lot about that aspect of his life.
And were you aware that up until about 15 or so, that Alan Wade was spending 2 or more days every week in the youth ministry of Pastor Schwartz's church?
I couldn't have told you that.
In your interaction with Alan Wade, did it appear to you that he was significantly addicted to drugs or alcohol?
No.
And you would have done something about that had you known about it?
I think I would have done something about it, yes.
So my records indicate that Mr. Wade dropped out of school at age 16, which would have corresponded with his 9th grade year at Baker County High. Does
Yes.
that make sense?
Makes sense.
So what we're talking about happened when he was 15 years old, approximately, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Is that yes?
Yes, that is.
Just for the record. And you believe that Ms. Gainey loved her son based on your interaction with her, correct?
Yes, I did.
And the things that she was trying to do for her son, correct?
Yes, I mean, I don't remember, I wouldn't say that because I wasn't sure everything she was doing for him. I just knew that the conversations that I had with her, I felt like she loved him.
And she was at least doing her best to be involved with the education of her son, correct?
I mean, I couldn't
Let me ask
answer
you,
that
let me ask
question.
a better question.
Okay.
Sorry, thank you. So like, she would return your phone calls when you called?
Yes, yes,
And she appeared to be interested in what was going on with Alan in school?
yes. When I talked to her, she was there. It was great.
And you have had the occasion to deal with parents that weren't,
Yes.
correct?
Yes, sir.
And parents that were, instead of working very hard to support their family and being absent, are absent because they're doing drugs or alcohol or any number of different bad things, correct?
That's right.
Okay, that's all the questions I have.
Follow-up,
Yes, sir. Did you ever see Alan Senior reinvested?
No,
Meaning Alan's father?
I didn't.
That phone call that you took,
Mm-hmm.
how did Alan react?
He teared up.
Burst out crying?
He was pretty emotional.
Was it obvious to you that Alan was a child that needed help?
Yes, I believe he needed attention.
Family support type of attention?
I felt there was a lack of overall family support.
And you wish you could have done more for him, right?
I mean, sure, anybody in those cases that I've dealt with a lot of kids, and you want to help them all you can.
After Alan had that reaction to the phone call, certainly didn't see him flourish much after that.
I really don't remember seeing him a whole lot after that, at all. Other than obviously later.
Right. May I have a moment? Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
members of the jury, any questions? I do see one. All right, Mr. Dobson, let me pose these questions to you from the jury. The first, what was the referral that Alan received that particular day? If you'll tell the jury.
Which day, I'm sorry?
I'm assuming we're talking about the day of the phone call to Ms. Gaines.
That, I don't think that was relative to a referral. I think it was him coming in and maybe expressing this concern.
Do you have any recollection of what his attendance history was?
I really didn't. There were so many students. He was just one of many, many, many students, and so I don't remember his attendance. I would I don't remember, normally there are processes if they're not attending, someone's attending to that, but no, I couldn't tell you.
Do you have any personal examples of Mr. Wade demonstrating empathy towards other people? Tell the jury.
Well, I do know that one of the things that that I asked him to do, a teacher expressed to me that he had been mouthy to her, or disrespectful, whatever you want to say, in the prior year. And I asked him to go and address that and apologize to her. And she came to me and said that he did that. So that was one. But I don't remember. I wasn't around him a lot, other than obviously the few times I met him in the office there, and so I don't know much about his interaction with people in that way. I do know he had an empathy for his mom. I do remember that he was sympathetic to what she was going through. He expressed that to me, and he had he was disappointed in his dad, but as I recall, I think he said he was disappointed, but he also was appreciative of the times that he did get to spend with him.
Follow-ups, Ms. Abel?
Yes, which may just clear this up. So when Alan was in your office during that phone call, he wasn't there because of a referral that day?
I don't think so.
Okay, but he had referrals in the past?
He had referrals.
Okay, and we talked about this earlier in your direct, that nothing comes to mind that you can think of that was especially egregious out of any of those referrals?
No, but I mean, normally a student would be moved. We had an alternative school where people
Right.
that were exhibiting really strong behaviors like that
Right.
would be moved.
And Alan wasn't moved?
He was still at school. yes.
Right,
So,
okay.
but I can't remember what the referrals were.
Mr. Mizrahi, you follow him? All right. Judge Dobson, thank you for your
Thank
time.
you.
You may stand down. Have a good afternoon. Ms. Abel, Mr. Richardson, Mr. Sorry? Sure. Do we need a reporter? Okay. Mizrahi. Paul, a point where it may well be, there's some logistical issues with defense witnesses that need to be addressed, and we may be at a point where if I call somebody else, it may slough over into later than what we would like. So I'm going to trust them to make the scheduling arrangements. So we're going to go ahead and take an evening recess. I am advised by counsel that there is a distinct possibility that most of the defense evidence should be over tomorrow, which means we should be able to conclude things on Wednesday pretty much as we had indicated to you before. There is still well, I'm not even going to say that. They're telling me that probably we should be able to be finished on Wednesday. So we are at the point where I'm going to give you my repetitive instruction about not discussing the case amongst yourselves or with anybody else. There has been, as you know, continuing presence of the press here, so please be discreet about your television viewing. Please have a pleasant evening. I'm going to ask that you come back, and we will resume at 9:30 tomorrow morning. Okay? All right, the jury is in recess. If participants will please remain. All right, the jury has left the courtroom. Go ahead and be seated, folks. Who will be the first witness tomorrow, Mr. Richardson, or? I'm sorry, Doctor? Oh, Castillo, okay. All right, well then, I would like to take a minute and share with you, and this is probably to be categorized as thinking out loud, and I probably shouldn't do this, but I am mindful that you all need some indication. So I've been thinking about the matter of the allocution since last week, and I want to explain to you where I have gotten to. It is not definitive, and it's not binding on you, and it's not binding on me either. I had told you already that I believe that it was probably appropriate for Mr. Wade to have the opportunity to address the sentencer, because I believe in this instance that the jury is as close to a judge would be in our former system. So I believe it's appropriate for him to speak to the jury if he wants to. I have also come to the conclusion that the state should have the same opportunity after an allocution as it would have had in our prior system. And by that I mean that in a previous allocution, the defendant could tell me what he wanted to, and then Mr. Mizrahi would have the argument, have the opportunity to argue against whatever it was he was said during that consideration. So by the same token, I believe that Mr. Mizrahi should have the opportunity to comment on whatever the allocution is during the course of closing arguments. I have told you I am concerned about specific facts coming up during the course of any allocution, and I still remain in a position that I believe if those do come up, that it would be the right of the state to proceed to cross-examine, even though Mr. Wade would not be under oath, or bring in whatever rebuttal witnesses that he might want to do so. So that's the framework. It occurs to me that perhaps the appropriate thing to do is for Mr. Wade to provide a written allocution, much as we have under the victim's impact, different process, admittedly. But that would at least give me the opportunity to decide whether or not I'm likely to find that there are statements, and of course it gives Mr. Mizrahi the opportunity, to look at that too. So that's my thinking right now. I do not need commitment from counsel about that at this point, but.
I think that if you provide a written allocution, you can do it next workday.
Would give it to
Well,
the state when he allocutes. I just don't want to give them his allocution ahead of time.
Well, you get the victim impact statements ahead of time. Why would he not, I'm going to want to, okay, we can talk. I asked to talk. So I say it's okay that I like this. What opportunity does the state have to disagree? I mean, how is he going to know whether or not there's facts to which he might object? So I'm not.
It'd be the same if the defendant chose to testify. He doesn't get a preview of Mr. Wade's testimony. And I think we're in agreement with everything the court has suggested. I don't anticipate his allocution covering anything really, to be honest. And so I have no objection to providing a full statement ahead of time and we'll give it to the state, which is when, they would be hearing his testimony if he were to.
Ms. Miller.
Shake your head, 'cause I don't know if that's.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but this is my proposal. He either provides it in writing and I share it with Mr. Mizrahi, or he doesn't provide it and you wing it. Well, he gets up and starts talking.
What you're either saying is that we're willing to, not just pretrial, provide a copy of whether.
I'm willing to discuss it. I'm willing to hear arguments about it. I don't, I don't want to suppress anything, but what have I, I also don't intend to cut another major party out of this process. And if, if Mr. Mizrahi has, I'm imagining that Mr. Mizrahi is not prepared, or does not want to sit there and lay landmines for Mr. Wade. So why not, have everybody, I know Ms. Miller is leering at my comment. As I said, sure, I'm not expecting a commitment. That's my thought process right now. I don't think it would be fair for me to see the allocution and approve it. I mean, talk about taking sides. Comment not necessary. All right, that's where I am on that. Any further thoughts or comments about this proposed verdict forms?
You're asking that the court give the standard verdict form, the standard instructions promulgated by the Florida Supreme Court in 2018, as well as the standard verdict form are still used. There have been approximately 11 capital cases tried since the decision. I think all but one that Mr. Mizrahi was involved in recently have used the standard instructions and the standard verdict form. In deciding pool, the Florida Supreme Court said, we're making these decisions as a matter of interpretation, but we're not commenting on the amendments in statute the legislature made. The statute remains the same, right? The step process where the state is required to prove an aggravating factor or factors beyond a reasonable doubt. Sufficiency of the aggravator, whether the defendants establish mitigation by the greater weight of the evidence, whether aggravation outweighs mitigation, and ultimately if death is the appropriate penalty, those are also statutory and the statute is not.
Ms. Miller, I understand that. I just want to know what the form is. I mean, the last time I looked at one of these, when it came to the aggravators, there was an actual vote. We find that this aggravator 12-0 or 11 or whatever. I don't remember.
It doesn't have the split on it anymore. I don't have a problem for the state one to split. It just says we find this aggravating factor proven to exist unanimously beyond a reasonable doubt, and then the form lists the aggravator.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, if that's what the current formula, as I said, I haven't looked. I had no reason to. What about mitigators? Is there?
We are asking that the mitigators and the list that we've given Your Honor ex parte is edited. I anticipate cleaning it up to mirror the language as the testimony was produced. Actually, but it's pretty close. We are asking if that mitigation.
Okay,
In the instructions and.
I'm gonna get. I told you already. I will give them all the mitigators that you established. What is the phrasing about? We find by a preponderance of the evidence that this mitigator was established.
Greater weight of the evidence?
Or greater weight. Okay.
Yes, in the case that I did hear with Mr. Mizrahi about a year ago, the state of Florida versus Russell Tillis, the state actually asked for all of the mitigating circumstances given on the verdict form. I'm paraphrasing, of course, but the state's argument essentially was that if a 12-0 death verdict was returned, the court to give weight, right, to whether the mitigating circumstances were established, the court needed to know what mitigating circumstances the jury found to exist in the 5-0 member. So we can certainly provide the court that verdict form and have the mitigating circumstances listed, and there was a split of the mitigators, but obviously doesn't have to be unanimous.
Okay.
I agree with the defense to the extent that the instruction should contain all 5 of the weighing factors.
No, I wasn't.
So that, in the state's standard instruction, is the law. The state has come to the conclusion, notwithstanding what I agree to, but subsequent to that, the statute only requires 2 jury votes. One is as to the aggravating factors, and the other as to the voting factors. The other weighing process are mandatory, but do not require separate jury findings. very, very difficult to parse out exactly what the jury is supposed to find. Are they finding that the mitigators exist? In other words, has it been proven Alan Wade was 18? Yes or no? And then the next question is that mitigated? So if you are going to include both of those elements, it becomes very unwieldy, difficult to parse out what the jury is finding, verdict form, understand. They're not required by law. Law requires an aggravating factor to be found out. Verdict form, states defense is requesting a negative verdict form. All the mitigating factors, one or both of the findings, one proven, two or not. And then again, when we finish, like I said, the problem with voting whether they're mitigating is they have no concept of weight. So I think if you try to think this, so I think it's very problematic to have in the verdict form, even if we include in the instructions what mitigating factor is.
Why am I concerned about the weight that they assert if I tell them you can only do it by the greater weight of the evidence?
Because we're asking the jury to make findings that don't have to be made. It's like asking the jury to say, well, we find the defendant either guilty or not guilty, but we have to have separate findings about the credibility of each witness, or separate findings about the weight of the particular elements, or separate findings about what we found after self-defense or not self-defense. Law consequences, the jury makes ultimate findings about based on range, based on first, the statement, the jury has to make findings, has to aggravate that. Why? Which the statute and Supreme Court says have to be made. That's what should run the jury, as well as the ultimate findings of how the sausage is made. The state feels is too unwieldy, confusing to the jury, not appropriate to include those in the jury. But forms, albeit argue them and need to be included in the instruction.
Yeah, go ahead.
A couple separate issues. I think, Mr. Mizrahi, correct me if I'm wrong, we agree on the instructions. We're just going to give the standard instructions of the five-step process listed in it.
I didn't ask you about instructions, I asked you about verdict form.
Okay, so then there's two issues on the verdict form.
Okay.
We are asking that the court give the standard verdict form. The state is asking the court to modify the standard verdict form. On the standard verdict form, there is a five-step process. And the five-step process, I would respectfully disagree with the state's representation, is required by the statute. I'm referring to Florida Statute 921.141, subsection 2, refers to findings and recommended sentence by the jury. This subsection applies only if the defendant is not waived his or her right to the sentencing proceeding by a jury. I'm skipping down. Subsection E says the jury shall return findings identifying each aggravating factor found to exist. A finding that an aggravating factor exists must be unanimous. If the jury, one, does not unanimously find, blah, blah, blah. Then subsection 2, so we're now at 921.141, sub 2, sub D2 says, unanimously finds at least one aggravating factor, the defendant is eligible for a sentence of death, and the jury shall make a recommendation as to the court as to whether the defendant shall be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or to death. Recommendation shall be based on a weighing of all of the following. A, whether sufficient aggravating factors exist. B, whether aggravating factors exist which outweigh the mitigating circumstances found to exist. C, based on the consideration in subparagraphs A and B, whether the defendant should be sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole or death. And so the statute absolutely still requires jury findings. The state is kind of misplacing Florida Supreme Court's decision in Poole was saying that the statute changed. The statute didn't change. The statute still requires that standard verdict form in conformity with it. And in fact, the Florida Supreme Court is no longer doing standard jury instructions or a verdict form that's now the ROR. And the committee on on the form. So those are two separate rulings. But I can see the board saying, okay, I'll give the standard form, but not the mitigators.
That's what concerned me about, considering the number of mitigators. And let me go back a minute. I can see how the statute could be complied with by asking questions, which did not necessarily mean that I have to ask you, did you, and I'm not going to quote from your, we'll say mitigator number 6, defendant's mitigator number 6 that I have the list of. Are you suggesting the verdict form says yes or no? And do I expect them to?
Instead of saying yes or no, it would just, you find, I can give you, and we did previously, is that you find this mitigating circumstance proven to exist by the greater weight of the evidence, and it has a mitigator listed, and just put it underneath it. So some of them, for instance, in the case of Mr. Mizrahi, would say 0 to 12, meaning the jury didn't find that mitigating circumstance, or mitigating circumstance found to exist. Some would say 12 to 0. Some would say whatever the circumstance.
But what do I care what the actual vote was if the jury says we find this mitigator to exist?
They can say that. I don't really.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I mean when if you ask the question.
Sure. Well, and so.
Not how did you vote on it. Now, we're talking, I'm talking about mitigators. I understand we're going to have some sort of specific revelation of the vote, if you will, on the aggravators, but.
You don't need the number on the aggravators because the aggravators have to be unanimous.
I understand. I mean, yes, we have unanimously decided. Anyway.
Right. Well, and what's interesting is the state might switch sides. So I heard Mr. Mizrahi argue the exact opposite position a year ago, and I was objecting kind of because of what the court had said, the unguiltiness or the cumbersomeness, and frankly, the statute doesn't assign a burden to us as far as burden of proof when it comes to mitigating circumstances. The Florida Supreme Court randomly did that when it came up with the jury instructions and the verdict form. But Mr. Mizrahi's point, which Judge Morello agreed with over my objection, was that if it is a 12-0 verdict for death, Your Honor could still sentence Mr. Wade for possession. And so there are some significant mitigating circumstances, some statutory, some non-statutory. And so how is Your Honor able to appropriately weigh the jury's verdict, right, to give it great weight in sentencing Mr. Wade either life or death if you didn't know which mitigating circumstances the jury found to exist? Because you're bound by their verdict. And so you can't say, essentially, I don't find any mitigating circumstances. The jury found mitigating circumstances. And so the verdict.
But that gets back to why does it have to be a vote?
I don't care if it's not a vote. I'm fine if it's just a tally. The vote is what Mr. Mizrahi had suggested before in the prior case.
All right.
One other thing I would say, and we move on, standard instruction does not put us out on mitigating circumstances. Standard verdict says under paragraph C, mitigating circumstances, it says one or more of the individual jurors find that one or more mitigating circumstances was established by the very weight of the evidence, yes or no. That's the standard. So we're both modifying the standard.
No, we won the standard, and when the Florida Supreme Court promulgated these standard instructions, they invited comment from a whole bunch of organizations about whether we wanted the specific mitigators, the defense bar, the FP, Florida Public Defenders Association, Factual, a bunch of different organizations submitted proposals about whether we wanted mitigating circumstances on the verdict form or not. And essentially, it was kind of left on a case-by-case basis. There were some defendants and their counsel who said we don't want it. There were some that said we do. We're asking for the 5-step process, period.
All right, this is what we're going to do. Assuming, based on Mr. Johnson's representation earlier, that we might conclude tomorrow, then I would like by noon tomorrow, shall we say, each of your proposed verdict forms. And I will look at it, and Amanda and I will talk about it, and I will do something. Rightly or wrongly, I will do something.
Well, you know you're going to do something.
Yeah, at least I'm going to do something. So, okay. All right. I have expressed my concerns about allocution and the jury, the verdict forms, what other matters does the council need to talk to me about, Mr. Mizrahi or Mr. Cooper? Anything from this end? All right. Shall we resume at, say, what, 9 o'clock? Well, I don't know. What are we going to? The jury's coming back at 9:30. Shall we reconvene at 9:15, just in case there are administrative matters we need to address? Okay. All right, then we is in recess until 9:15 tomorrow.